Welcome on to a Memorial Day Eve version of Dunc'd On. Couple games to talk about. Since it was such a blowout last night, we decided we're going to spend a little time with our families after the game. Who are we kidding? The first half was over. Did watch a little of the second half, but once it got to 40, it was probably time to pack it in. But I think where we need to start is with Sunday night's game. The New York Knicks stay alive improbably. They trailed 55-35 late in the second. All kinds of foul trouble for Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, and they were able to get back into it in particularly the fourth quarter behind Karl Anthony Towns. His 20 points in 7 minutes, scored 15 of the Knicks' first 17 in the period, and the Knicks managed to execute down the stretch, out-execute the Pacers, notching their third 20-point comeback win of these playoffs. They and the Pacers are the only two teams to ever have more than one such win in a playoffs. What's going to leave this game with you?
Karl Anthony Towns. And he battled foul trouble for a lot of it. And the Knicks deserve credit for cutting the Pacers' maximum lead from they had it. It was 20, as you said, late in the first half. Got it to 10. So it wasn't 20 at halftime. It was a little less than that. But then they only trimmed that deficit by 3 in the third quarter. And I'm like, I thought the Knicks played better. I thought they showed a little bit more burst, but they're going to need to do a lot better. And it was really,
and the third quarter was weird. It fluctuated between like 16 and 11, like 16 and 30. It really even didn't get below 13 hardly at all until the very end.
Mm-hmm. And so kind of wondering what the Knicks are going to do, the looming possibility of Towns and Brunson foul trouble, one of which reared their head, the other ended up being okay. And it was Towns. It was the dominance that he had during that fourth quarter, as you said, 15 to 17. And it was a variety of different things. He hit 3 of 4 from 3, but I thought his drive game was really impressive. And so the Indiana Pacers were kind of playing on their back heel. They didn't, at one point they had Miles Turner in, and Turner was getting beat. Then briefly Tony Bradley came in and got absolutely demolished during his minute 17. And so then Turner ended up playing a fair amount. And so Towns, to me, that run gave them the platform kind of similarly. So Siakam's run at the beginning of game 2 kind of kept the Pacers in it. And then this one brought the Knicks back into really like making this a game and eventually gave them a lead they established.
Yeah, the Pacers defense wasn't bad throughout the game. They continued to be awesome getting over screens, but that didn't matter as much with Karl Anthony Towns. And I was reminded, particularly with some of the units they had on the floor with Hart, with DeLon Wright getting some time with those groups, Brunson largely off the floor, that the Pacers' Achilles heel is that they probably don't help enough at the rim. They weren't helping enough on Karl Anthony Towns. They believe in taking away the three-point line. They largely have done that very well in these playoffs. But Karl Towns, particularly when it's the center driving on the center, it's tough to get help. That's why that game can be so difficult to deal with. And they didn't get out on it a few times in transition as well. And that was really their inability to stop him at the start of the fourth. It was one of the biggest things that really hurt them in this game. And the Knicks ate up all this time. And maybe Rick Carlisle was a little bit late taking TJ McConnell off the floor as well. His stylings were great in the first half, not so much in the second. He had a lot of McConnellized possessions where he would just try to get that step-up screen early, dribble through the lane, not really do anything. All of a sudden, there's 10 on the shot clock. And, oh, by the way, if he passes it, then you don't have to guard him after he passed it. There was, I think, the Pacers' offensive process, not attacking Towns as much, not attacking Brunson as much when he was in the game, was lacking there. But ultimately, the Knicks played a great game. And I guess the next thing that I would want to talk about is the Knicks defense was very good in this one.
Well, and that ties in. I'll bridge these two with a stat.
Okay.
In the fourth quarter, the New York Knicks took 13 shots in the paint, only listed as 1 of 2 in the restricted area, but 5 of 11 in the upper paint. The Pacers only took 5 shots in the paint and missed all 5. So there's also some improvement that can happen there. But also, some of this was fouling late. But Knicks got to the line 16 times. Pacers got their 11 just in the fourth quarter. And this was a really low foul game in the beginning. It didn't stay that way forever. And so the Knicks, it's, the playoffs are so fun because things can turn on a dime and it can go in a lot of different directions. And Jalen Brunson had a fabulous passing game 2. And I thought he was a lot sloppier in game 3. He not necessarily like some of the passes were, but also some of his shoot pass decisions. Brunson was 6 of 18 overall in the game. And also we saw, game 2 partially swung late because the Pacers attacked him more aggressively, particularly with Tyrese Haliburton. And Brunson has been so focal to the Knicks offense, MVP candidates, MVP ballot candidacy and all that. And I thought that Brunson's foul trouble, and I never would have expected this time. This part, I guess you could have. I think it was in a weird way, just in this narrow game, a blessing in disguise, because it in many ways forced Tom Thibodeau, that plus some of Miles McBride's foul trouble earlier in the game, which ended up not mattering in the long term. It led Tibbs to some defense first lineups, and they took everything away from the Pacers. Transition. The Pacers had 0 fast break points, in part because the Knicks scored really well in that fourth quarter, but also just they took away good looks. They forced some turnovers. It was fabulous Knicks defense.
No, it was. And really, in the fourth quarter, it showed the most. And that was even with Karl Towns playing the entire fourth. And so one of the things we have on our site that we can actually look at live, it'll be hopefully available to everyone this fall. That's the plan. We're working on it. But in the beta version, which I can look at right now, Karl-Anthony Towns on the floor, Mitchell Robinson off. The Indiana Pacers only got 2 baskets at the rim, and got fouled going to the rim once. And that was it. The Pacers scored okay, but that's because they shot 7 of 9 from mid-range in those minutes. So that's the Towns only minutes at center were about 20 minutes, and that was most of the fourth quarter. I don't think he and Robinson played a second together.
They did not
in the fourth quarter, and a lot of it down the end was the old maligned starting lineup that played pretty well. We'll talk about how the double big look did, of course, later on today. But there are some of these possessions, like one with about 2 minutes left. This is with Brunson out again because Brunson got his 5th foul, was taken out, and then the Knicks were doing pretty well. And this was even with Karl-Anthony Towns on the floor. You had Pacers drives. Someone, OG Anunoby, I thought was awesome at this, coming off of the corner to stop the initial drive and step up. And then they would try to throw it to the corner. There would be the next guy going down to the corner. The guy who was guarding whoever drove initially would then just peel back out to the top. If the Pacers tried to run quick slips to the basket, or if they tried to run a quick pick and pop to get a switch and a closeout, the Knicks would just switch and close it down. They just continued throughout entire possessions playing 24 seconds of defense in the half court, which was awesome. There were a few flubs in terms of fast break plays and transition, even in the fourth. But the Knicks half court defense was just incredible communicating. And this has been a topic of conversation around the team all season of like, why do you have really good communicating games? Why do you have a game like game 5 in Boston where you just don't communicate at all and you give up all these slips when you're trying to switch or do all this stuff? And then also I thought that Tom Thibodeau, because of some of the personnel that they had out there defensively, he felt comfortable changing up and actually going back to a drop coverage with Karl-Anthony Towns, who then did well getting out on Turner if needed, or they would rotate out of that. But they didn't actually switch every single time in the fourth. But when they did that most of the time, it worked really well. So just a ton of credit to the Knicks for, I didn't think they had the answers, particularly not with Karl-Anthony Towns at center and no Mitchell Robinson, for this Pacers offense. And in the fourth quarter, helped maybe a little bit by the fact that Aaron Nesmith sprained his ankle. They really were able to defend well. They took away a bunch of the switches too. that had been killing them, and that was probably the best thing the Pacers had was just like mismatched switch hunting. But that's supposed to be a component of
Mhm.
Pacers offensive basketball in the half court, not the whole thing. And that's really all they were able to get to.
And something that was striking, so the start of the fourth quarter was McBride, DeLon Wright, Landry Shamet. So that's pretty small, but you got some
Yeah.
really good defenders in that group.
Shamet replaced Campaign, I think, basically just to get a little bit more switchability defensively. And also because
Yes.
they had Josh Hart on the second unit who could do more ball handling.
Yeah, and so Hart took on, and then Hart and Towns were the last two, and then eventually Wright and Shamet were replaced by Anunoby and Bridges. Not surprised because those guys are starters, some of the more important players on the team. And so having guys who could get over, get around screens made a lot of difference. And Wright, I thought, it was the idea, like, you could heat up the ball, could make life harder. And the other, like, really big thing that kind of stuck out, it's one of those, it felt big in the moment, and then it's even more significant in hindsight, was McBride hitting. He had 7 quick points in the beginning of the fourth quarter, and I
The
thought,
beginning of the fourth,
was
I
it, or was
thought
it big, was
Towns. It must have been maybe
must
end of
have
the
been
third
the end of the third. Might have been the
because
end of the third.
Towns had 15 of their first 17.
Yes, it was probably the end of the third. But it was a stretch where, like, the Knicks, they had cut the margin a little bit, but they're doing that. And then we did this on as a live show, that the Knicks were having two problems in offensively. They weren't generating great looks, but also their shot making was pretty poor. And yes, the McBride run was at the end of the third quarter.
Yeah,
And
yeah, Bridges really so like particularly when the Pacers were making their run in the second, Bridges was missing a lot of pretty good looks.
And then, so those 7 points that McBride scored, they were a mix of the two. He generated a couple of good looks, got a corner three, but then also, had some good shot making, made a mid-ranger that was pretty well contested. And so it kind of got some of the momentum going, and then they defended really well. And I thought, and McBride, it's an interesting arc for him, because early in the game, he commits 3 fouls in roughly a minute. I'll get the actual amount of time he played in the first quarter. McBride
Yeah,
played a
it was
minute
within
22.
yeah, exactly. It's at 3 fouls in a minute 22. It was like, I've never seen that before. I'm like, I'm pretty sure. Like, did you have like Kurt Thomas on your team? Like that, like
And
you've definitely seen that before. You coached the Knicks in the 90s with Herb Williams coming in off the bench for Patrick Ewing. Like, I'm pretty sure you've seen that before, buddy. But
and two of those 3 came on a single trip down the floor where Miles Turner drew 3 fouls and then hit a 3. And so McBride removed unceremoniously after those fouls, and he came back and, redeemed himself. And this was before, it's so funny to think about now, but before the fourth quarter, Karl Anthony Towns total line was 4 points on 2 of 8 from the field, 4 turnovers,
oof.
4 fouls, and then he puts it together and has this magnificent fourth quarter. And so you had some really good redemption, also putting those players in a chance to succeed a little bit differently than before. And so there's definitely a lot to feel better about with the Knicks. And a question that I'm just kind of lingering on is just, and this will of course be relevant in the other game 3 that we will discuss later on, is what from this game sticks for both teams, and what of this game feels a little bit anomalous? Because the Pacers were up by 20 and lost, and the way that the Knicks came back, like, are they going? Is Tom Thibodeau really willing to play some of the lineups that did so well in this, or some of the concepts in this, when Jalen Brunson isn't in foul trouble, when they have their normal company guys? And I think we're just going to have to find out the answer. I don't know it for sure.
Yeah, let's put a pin in that one actually, because there's a lot to talk about as far as what this means going forward. But
Sure.
Tom Thibodeau certainly, like, he's one of his phrases is that the game tells you what to do. He's not the only one to ever say that, but I think he feels that way a lot from a coaching perspective, that he will stick with something that is working in the moment. And I want to talk about the end of the game though, just because it was pretty memorable. I mean, the New York won by 6, but this was a one possession game down the end, and they didn't even bring Brunson back in until there were under 2 minutes remaining, and then they were able to go offense defense. That was that was pretty big. And you had this great sequence where Knicks are up by 2. Bridges somehow gets behind the Indiana defense, and Pascal Siakam comes out of nowhere to block him. And then the Pacers somehow get Pascal Siakam behind the defense. I think Towns could have picked him up and didn't. OG fouls him. Siakam gets, and then you're just like, yeah, the Pacers, they never stop, never stopping, right? they are, they are just absolutely relentless, and they got another just cheap bucket. But that would be the last bucket that they would get while they were within a possession of the New York Knicks. And so Brunson comes back in. There's this ugly possession where the ball gets knocked out of bounds. Halliburton was trying to say that he knocked it off of Bridges. No one seemed to agree with him. I couldn't see any evidence that Bridges touched it. So 7 on the shot clock. Brunson rips through against his nemesis, Aaron Nesmith. There was this weird circumstance late where all of a sudden Brunson could score on Nesmith and he couldn't score on Shepard or Nembhard. I don't know what happened there all of a sudden, but he ripped through really tough floater over Aaron Nesmith, and Aaron Nesmith did sprain his right ankle. He had to slide with his pushing off his right ankle. Does he get there if he doesn't have a sprained ankle? Who knows? But that was a huge shot with just over a minute left. And then Nesmith also missed a shot that could have tied it, and the Knicks did a really good job communicating again. They did a switch at the point of attack. Halliburton, instead of trying to attack Towns, threw it to the opposite corner to Nesmith, who had been guarded by Bridges, because Bridges took the roll man off of that switch. Brunson was supposed to go out to the corner. He was a little late, but he did run Nesmith off the line, and Nesmith missed a short floater. That's probably not his shot really in the best of times. So good defense there by New York. And then on the other end, the ball would get knocked out of bounds, and Brunson ended up airballing a shot. It lands in Siakam's hands right as the shot clock is expiring, and they immediately call a 24-second violation. Another one of these calls that just is totally inconsistent. I just love the way they do it in international, where if it's anywhere close, they just let him play. Like, it's got to just be like such an obvious shot clock violation. Like, if the other team has the ball, like, you just let it go, or is about to get the ball, you just let it go. And that was huge because they had Towns, who was like limping around. I didn't really see what happened to him, and Brunson both on the floor with 5 fouls with 37 seconds left. And because there was a violation, they got to sub both those guys out.
Right.
And then the Pacers only had 1 timeout left at that point too. They had used their last one on a challenge, which was successful, when the referees incorrectly said that Aaron Nesmith had touched the ball. Yeah. So the Pacers then can't advance the ball to get a 2-for-1. They have to bring it the length of the floor. Knicks have Mitchell Robinson on the floor. He switches on to Halliburton. Halliburton drives him, and Anunoby does a great job of picking him up, then passing him off, and then Robinson is able to find Miles Turner back up top, and was a little late getting to it, but still got a very good contest on a Turner 3 for the lead with under 24 seconds to go that just went in and out. And if that's Karl-Anthony Towns, if they don't get that shot clock violation, no way Karl-Anthony Towns, I would think, makes that play. Who knows whether Turner makes it or misses it, but they're in much better position. Hart got the rebound, made his 2 free throws immediately. It was also the fact that they didn't have to worry about getting the ball in bounds. I'm guessing Tom Thibodeau probably went over that a little bit after game 1.
Yeah, probably. Possibly. Well, and another part of this is so with the shot clock violation is that the Knicks did a really good job 2 separate times making the pace in the final 30 seconds, making the Pacers spend time like working the ball up the floor, getting the action. And so if that's a shot clock, if that's a live ball, the Pacers probably get something. Maybe it wouldn't have been a true 2-for-1 because maybe they would have scored too fast. But it would have been in that. And so instead of Turner like taking time and not getting a good shot, or I mean, it was contested. It was, you know what I'm saying? And so that was a big change. And then the next time, so they have to foul because it's under 24 seconds. Hart makes both. And then the Pacers are down 4, and it takes them about 10 seconds to really get into anything. And then Halliburton gets fouled and it's gets fouled. I believe it was inside the arc, so it's 2 shots, and so you burned half of the remaining time, and you didn't get you didn't get a three, you didn't get a three up or anything like that. And the Pacers did still have a timeout left, but you don't want to use it in that circumstance for this exact reason. And so it's funny because a long time ago, I think maybe it was in game 4 against the Cavs. I thought the Pacers did a fabulous job when they were up like 8 doing this exact same thing, which is, yeah, maybe you're going to give something up, but if it takes them twice as long to get it, that does you a lot of good, even if you end up not getting the stop.
Yeah, and overall, the Knicks played really good defense in this one. Let's talk a little bit more about the meat of the game, and then we can transition into talking about how this is going to apply the rest of the series. The Knicks started the double big and actually got out to an 11-6 lead. Their defense looked very good. They put Karl Anthony Towns on Siakam, and that actually was totally fine. That's something that I think can be possibly carried forward. Now, are they going to run more Halbert and Siakam pick and roll? Well, you still got Robinson on the floor as well, but maybe they'll try to just space out Miles Turner more to the corner, have him playing less above the break, and then you just put Towns in the action with Halliburton. But then also you can switch that, and you just have more overall size on the floor. And I thought that looked pretty good too, having Anunoby on Nembhard.
Yes.
There's a play early. Nembhard tries to get to the rim, actually has him beaten, but Anunoby's just too big, totally swallows him up. Like Nembhard is used to having more of a size advantage, right? Or Brunson, he can still guard Neesmith, but Nembhard is someone that you can kind of help off of a little bit if you're OG Anunoby, much more so than Siakam. And so I liked the fact that they went with, because I think one of the reasons they were scared to do the double big was because of the Towns Siakam matchup. But as we pointed out, like Karl Anthony Towns has guarded real players in playoff series before. Like Kevin Durant is a harder cover than Pascal Siakam, as good as Siakam is playing, but Siakam has been largely beating smaller players or just running the floor, which, maybe that's a place you could be a little bit scared of Towns matching up with them. But I thought that with the double big, their half court defense looked pretty good. And, I think that would still be my group going forward here as well. And then I thought it also, with some of the other rotational changes that you can get to, really helped them in some of their bench units later in the game too.
It did. And I want to just emphasize the Anunoby on Nembhard wrinkle, because having Anunoby as an opportunistic help defender, and he could usually do that and not sacrifice the main assignment, which is an amazing thing because Anunoby has length. He can move extremely well. Good thing that the knee thing that we at one point were concerned about in game 2 didn't really linger. But so having Mitchell Robinson in the starting lineup also allowed Robinson to he played 29 minutes. I thought he looked very good out there when he was there. He didn't play much in the fourth. It's pretty amazing considering I think he played 36 seconds or something like that in the fourth. He still played 29 minutes. But after game 2, we were talking about the concept of Robinson in the starting lineup and that he would be replacing Josh Hart, and that allowed Hart to fill a role as at times secondary, but mostly primary creator on the backup units when Brunson was off the floor, which ended up being more than expected due to his foul trouble. And Hart can, he's not the greatest advantage creator, but he can make decisions. He tried to get downhill. He's of course always aggressive. And that allowed them to, having Hart out there, someone who they trusted, allowed them to experiment with Shamet instead of Payne. And McBride's foul trouble kind of allowed them to fiddle with Wright, who then played well enough that he got to play a little bit later. And so some of it, I think, was necessity being the mother of invention. When you move a guy into the starting lineup at the expense of somebody else, it obviously shuffles things in your rotation. And then the right thing happened more because of McBride's early foul trouble, but then they were able to reap some rewards from that later in the game.
Yeah, the one thing I would have done as Thibodeau was maybe play Robinson in 3 stints, get him at least a little bit of time, maybe end of the first. But they want to have Karl Towns in there when Brunson is off the floor. But they couldn't do that due to the foul trouble. They were able to get enough defensively through, and then on offense through guys like Bridges and Hart, like you mentioned, and just matching the energy of those McConnell units, I thought it was important for them. And so I think they did kind of find something there again, going Shamet instead of Payne. Shamet missed his one difficult three. Like, I don't think he's giving you a ton on offense. He's probably a more reliable shooter than Payne. But if you feel like you have enough ball handling, then you can get a little more defense out of Shamet getting through screens, especially if you're switching. That's where Payne is really going to fall apart because they switched most of the time in this one. Now, as far as how that worked, you had that possession like we talked about where Miles Turner drew 2 loose ball fouls and an offensive rebound on McBride, and then also drew a foul in the same possession trying to post up. So that pushed New York into the bonus, and they committed 3
Oh yeah.
non-shooting fouls in the bonus just in the first, and they committed 6 for the game. And that's Indiana ended up with 4, but some of those were intentional fouls late. So that's basically 12 free points that New York, or at least if Indiana made their free throws a little bit better, would have handed them. And the Knicks also made a bunch of mistakes on offense as well. 0 turnovers in the first, 6 in that fateful second quarter. Halliburton was a terror with 4 steals in the first half. The Knicks had 7 bad pass turnovers,
Yeah.
which we saw the Timberwolves set big records for lost ball turnovers, but this was bad pass turnovers by the Knicks with Halliburton working great in the passing lanes in the first, and then the Pacers getting out in the break, which the Knicks were just not really going to do much of in the best of times. So, the Pacers certainly earned that lead, and then they finished up 5 out of 25 from 3. The 25 is good for New York. Like, that's the switching is definitely a big part of that. But the 5, you would expect the Pacers to shoot a little bit better, even though it didn't feel like in the second half in particular, the Pacers were getting many wide open shots. So New York, I think they at least found something where they weren't just going to get totally clown showed on defense. And some of that was big. Some of that was playing Shamet and Wright, who are better players. Some of it, frankly, was Towns and Brunson being in foul trouble and playing less themselves. And some of it was Anunoby just having a fantastic defensive game. Overall, he's really the ringleader on some of these closeouts and passing lane plays and good communication. Like, I'm sure they just really worked on how they were going to play, and they got some practice on it in the Celtics series. So I would say that the Knicks found something, and maybe Brunson could just go crazy in the next game too. Like, I don't think that the Pacers have a massively significant edge in the series going forward, but they are, the one blowout that's happened has been the Pacers. Even that wasn't that much of a blowout. So I think these teams are relatively close together, but we've seen, of course, Indiana just go crazy in their building and run teams off the floor. That's the one thing that I think the Knicks are going to kind of struggle to do is just run Indiana out of the gym.
That's a fair point. And the Pacers, because of the intensity they play with on both ends of the floor, they can make series, whether it involves actual injuries or just fatigue, wars of attrition. And so guys just play like worse versions of themselves over the course of a series. But the thing that could push back the other way is Aaron Nesmith. And Nesmith has been huge defending Brunson in this series and turned his ankle pretty badly. Thankfully, I guess, it appears so. It was his right ankle that he turned in game 3. I believe when I did some quick looking during the broadcast that the ankle that he missed extended time with this year was his left.
Yeah, that's correct.
So it's better that it's not the same one, but it looked like a pretty bad ankle sprain. And I was thinking back to one that Kyle Lowry had in the Eastern Conference Finals a few years ago, or like a few years ago. It was probably like 2017. Where the idea with a bad ankle sprain sometimes is that it's easier to play on that day than when it swells up and gets bad. And so considering the structure of this series, I mean, I love for every team to be as healthy as possible, that it's not just if Nesmith can't play, though, of course, that would be really bad. But this is an every other day series as long as it goes. And so if he is a diminished version of himself, has a little bit of trouble getting through screens, which he has been incredible at in this series, that makes life a lot easier on the Knicks. And I agree with you that the talent disparity, the overall advantage is not that severe. To me, if Nesmith is out, of course, but if he's really limited, then that could shift it for an individual game or games, depending on the nature of the injury.
Yeah, and it looked like definitely worse than your garden variety ankle sprain. Like it definitely got the side of the ankle to the floor, and but he was moving reasonably well. Like he wasn't like visibly limping out there when he was trying to run. Obviously, the biggest thing though for an ankle sprain is pushing off that right foot going sideways. But he also doesn't need to be like some great finisher at the basket either. He plays a physical style, and also maybe just his base won't be right for shooting over 40% from three either. And maybe Rick Rowley just won't play him as many minutes. So we'll just have to see what kind of shape he's in. I do think it's enough of a sprain where he could be limited to some degree. Um, this is a good question that we got from Numera now about the Knicks having 3 20-point comebacks in this playoffs. We talked about what makes the Pacers able to come back before. Do you have any thoughts on why the Knicks have been such a good comeback team?
I mean, they have a lot of talent. I mean, that's one basic point. I mean, Karl Anthony Towns having 4 points in the first quarter and then having, or the first three quarters, and then having 20 in 7 minutes is a luxury that most teams can't afford. And to do that without Jalen Brunson on the floor for basically the whole fourth was really telling. They also are inconsistent defensively, and inconsistency can sometimes lead to a comeback because you could play better, and so things can shift. And I
Yeah,
mean,
it's really to me more about them getting down than them coming back in some
sure.
ways.
Yeah, and they also have an offense that can be. I mentioned their inconsistency defensively. They have an offense that can be inconsistent too. And I mean, some of the two of those comebacks against the Celtics, Boston just couldn't put the ball in the basket. That was a mix of Boston's troubles and the Knicks. And I don't want to undersell what the Knicks did well in that series. The Knicks doing it. So yeah, and it's also because of this. I mean, remember when we did the ranking of playoff comebacks, and of course, this one didn't count in, wasn't considered in that. Neither was the Pacers comeback in Game One, but the Knicks ones were a little bit lower in part because they happened over a larger period of time and everything else. So, like, they are striking, they are impressive, and they have given them a platform in these series. But it's not. It's a different kind of thing. It's over the course of longer. It's not the barrage of like 14-2 in 2 minutes. That just hasn't been that way for the Knicks.
Yeah, the only big run they went on was when it's interesting that this is the case again. With Brunson, it was game one where Brunson again got in foul trouble. Foul trouble with 2 games in the series. Got his fifth, and then they went on a 14-0 run in
Right.
six or 14-2, maybe it was in 6 possessions in game one when he went out. But I think it really gets back to the defense though,
Mhm.
and where I mean they allowed 42 points in the second half. And like those Celtics games, the Celtics just couldn't score in the fourth quarter of games 1 and 2. Like those are these 3 comebacks, and so I think that's where the inconsistency comes in. Is that especially Towns and Brunson, like those are offensive players, like those guys really need to lock in, or maybe they get in foul trouble and they go out of the game for a little bit. And someone like Mitchell Robinson can come in and play really well. OG also, like it seems like his energy level can vary at least a little bit. He's someone who I think is a big part of these, really ramps it up. Someone like McBride can get Hosh. Josh Hart is another guy who is an energy player, but hasn't necessarily stood out a lot of times because it's not their offense. Like their offense, almost always, they had moments in this series early where they looked awesome. That was not the case tonight. 13 assists on 34 field goals. I think the Knicks were also helped actually by this being a higher foul game. Like their guys got into foul trouble, but there was a lot of stuff called. The Knicks just have more guys who are going to try to go one on one and more simulators, I would say, as well. And Towns and Brunson in particular, guys who can really be affected by the refereeing. And so having it in this game 52 fouls called was to the Knicks' advantage in the end. It also just slows everything down, gets a chance for everyone to catch their breath, fewer fast breaks, etc. So
I have a
I think
question for
that
you.
yeah. So well, let me just to
Oh,
sum it up. I
sure.
think it's ultimately the defense and their energy level and their defensive execution. And that's really been the case all season, I would say, where they can look pretty good defensively, but other times they're just like Towns will be really inconsistent defensively.
Okay, so the question I have for you: we're not his biggest fans as an overall player, though we understand his value. Obi Toppin, the Indiana Pacers outscored the Knicks by 19 points in the 14 minutes he played in the first three quarters. He plays 0 seconds in the fourth. Do you agree with that decision? Was there a place for him to be a part of it?
I think so, because I think that he and Siakam can be the front court when it's just Towns at center. Like against Robinson, maybe not, right? That's where going to Tony Bradley made sense because he's their best rebounder. And so you get him into matchup with Robinson. But Bradley is going to hurt your offense some. And particularly Towns, yeah, you know what? Like putting Siakam on him, like Siakam wasn't in foul trouble, particularly in the fourth quarter. But like Siakam, yeah, maybe Pounds posts him up or like it's a rebound or something, but he also is just going to completely destroy Tony Bradley. Tony Bradley can't deal with him out in space at all. And then Toppin and Siakam forcing Towns to guard one of those guys, but as the center, not the power forward. And then particularly if you're playing TJ too, the ability to run with Siakam, TJ, and Toppin could just run Towns off the floor. So I think they should, as long as it's Towns as the lone big on those backup units, I would just go small with Siakam and Toppin together and not worry as much about having a true center out there, because that's where you're, or obviously you put that true center on Hart instead if you have to go that route, which I just wouldn't.
Yeah, you don't need to as the Pacers. And it was especially, it stuck out a little bit to me kind of thinking about the game after the fact, that Jalen Brunson wasn't on the floor, so you don't have to deal with some of Toppin's limitations in those respects as well. Like they're playing defensive lineups that aren't necessarily going to exploit it. And that's another one of the big mistakes that the Pacers made in that fourth quarter was, and this ties in with their overall philosophy, but when the other team is playing right in particular, but I mean to a lesser extent McBride too, though McBride's made his shots. Like there are or Josh Hart. Like there are players that are on the floor, and Hart played the entire fourth quarter, who you can help off of and not get burned that often. And so particularly when Towns went on his barrage, like one way of doing that is to have a big on the floor and doing everything else. But the other way is to just throw more bodies at him. And it's a lot more frustrating when a team fails to do so when there are clear cut ways they can do that without getting burned.
Another thing I might consider with Rick is they played 4 minutes and 37 seconds with Halliburton and TJ McConnell. Just didn't particularly, I don't particularly love that combination necessarily. But I don't think Halliburton played 37 minutes. Should they have gone a little bit harder in this one just to get, I mean, it's always hard, right? Like what makes the Pacers is they're not playing guys 43 minutes a game. And I also think it really helped the Knicks too to not be playing their guys. Like the most minutes anyone played tonight for the Knicks was Anunoby at 37. And like the Knicks had moments where they had these defensive groups out there, but Tibbs was able to steal a few minutes and they're able to make a little bit of a run. And so I thought that was really helpful for New York to not have, like, Mikal Bridges played 45 minutes in game 2. And so to not have to play those guys as many minutes, I thought was pretty big for New York to be able to have the energy that they did to fly around at the end. So I credit Tom Thibodeau for breaking out DeLon Wright and having him play a conventional pick and roll defense on Halliburton for a few possessions, get over some screens, and not to play hard as many minutes, get 11 minutes for Shamet, just to buy some time, because like these Pacers bench units, it's not like they're putting these players out there who are just like, oh man, if we have the wrong matchup against Ben Shepherd, we're just never going to be able to survive, right? Like you can go a little bit deeper into your bench. And I laud Thibodeau, in part helped by the foul trouble, but I laud him for coming to that conclusion of like, hey, we got to just be able to match their energy. And particularly the amount of flying around that we're going to have to do on defense is just going to require us to go a little deeper into the bench. And that worked for him.
One other kind of rotational decision that I wanted to point out was that The Knicks start out the fourth quarter with a 7-2 run, where the only 2 points the Pacers generate is a Miles Turner Hart fouls Turner like really late clock. Turner gets 2 free throws, and after Wright gets a layup and I transition semi transition, Rick Carlisle calls timeout. 10:22 remaining in the game. 7-2 run, margins cut to 5. I'm like, oh, he's calling this timeout to bring Tyrese Halliburton in the game. Does not, in fact, bring Tyrese Halliburton in the game. Ensuing possession, Josh Hart gets a steal. Towns gets an and one, which he eventually misses the free throw. And then he brings Halliburton in. And so it's like, okay, congratulations, you got that extra 22 seconds. You also did a turnover and gave up an and one in transition. And I like you, I'm sympathetic to the idea that you don't want to burn Halliburton because it's every other game in the series, and you if you do that, but the Pacers offense just loses so much organization when Halliburton's off the floor. And my read on it was that they were losing the flow offensively. And it's not like their offense was great once Halliburton returned to the game. They had an 80 offensive rating in the fourth quarter. But my instinct when you see something like that is like, hey, it was more how bad the Pacers' offensive possessions were, even the one where they got bailed out. It's like, we need something better here.
The other adjustment I think the Pacers need to make is just finishing at the rim. And they need to, what I would recommend they do is get the big out on the floor and then attack. And they're just doing a lot of driving and kicking. That's what they like to do. And Halliburton in particular, I think, had a lot of plays where he's getting into the paint, but he's not truly forcing the help to kick out. And of course, as mentioned, the Knicks helping and their peel switching was really good, and they're able to stay ahead of the pass. The Pacers believe it in the pass, and they, who knows, maybe game 4 that the Knicks won't look like that, and they'll get a ton of threes or a ton of plays at the rim off of closeouts. But I think the Pacers need to be a little bit more cognizant of just trying to finish at the rim. And OG Anunoby has given some good secondary rim protection. Like, that's another guy you have to look out for there. I really can't emphasize enough how important he was to the Knicks defense tonight. But Halliburton also, like, he's had chances to go to like his lane line floater off the glass. Like, that's a good shot for him. That's a good shot for Indiana. I think he needs to start taking that a little bit more. I also want to see more, and this is where maybe Indiana misses Buddy Hield, as we always talked about. But as long as Nesmith, who's a shooter they really respect, can be healthy, I would maybe try to get him into some of these actions, run some Spain pick and rolls, cause some miscommunications. Again, Knicks did a pretty good job of dealing with that, but that's something where the Knicks don't have a ton of experience dealing with kind of some more complex stuff. So that I would appreciate them doing some of that as well.
Well, Nate, you brought up the driving kick, and that made me want to look this up. The Indiana Pacers only attempted 6 corner threes in the game. One of them was by TJ McConnell, and one of them was by Tony Bradley.
That's right. Tony Bradley. David Locke just felt something there and was reminded of all the podcasts that he did talking about Tony Bradley maybe working on his 3-ball when he was a Jazz draftee in the last decade. Yeah, I mean, and the Knicks are not a big passing team, even with the Pacers not doing that much switching. So I think the Pacers defense is still pretty good, right? Like, they're getting through screens, they're wearing guys down a little bit. So it's really on the Pacers offensive end where the Knicks could bring him down a little bit. And maybe Brunson could be a little bit better than he's been, but like the Knicks got to actually, and this is on both Brunson and the screeners, they got to just like get a solid screen. And maybe Brunson is just too slow where Nesmith gets over the screen and is behind him and it's just too easy for him to get back in front. So, or if like you try to set the screen higher, then they can just go under and get back to Brunson because Brunson's not that fast. So maybe you need to do that and then rescreen. But they are getting no separation at the point. getting the defender off of the guy. So they just got to do a better job of screening, and Brunson has to do a better job of setting it up.
Can I say one random thing that I think will tickle you? Just how my weird brain works. Every once in a while, I get confused when Tony Bradley's on the floor, and my brain goes to Patrick O'Brien. Can you think of why?
Oh, no, I don't think I can.
Because he went to Bradley University. And so every once in a while, it's center Bradley, and my brain goes to Patrick O'Brien, and I nearly did it on the broadcast twice. But it was just like that's just how my brain works. I thought you'd enjoy that.
Yeah. Well, what are we gonna do when Carter Bryant gets drafted? Then you're gonna really have problems.
Real problems.
Okay. Let's move on to what took place last night. The Minnesota Timberwolves blew out OKC by 40. They were up a ton at halftime. OKC, wait a minute. They started the second half an 11-2 run. Oh, no, it re-escalated very quickly from there, and Mark Daigneault pulled the plug shortly thereafter. What was your big takeaway on how the Wolves were able to turn it so severely from what took place in the first two games?
I think at times there can sometimes be a tendency when you have a swing back this severe to kind of write it all off. Oh, it was a game from hell for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Everything went right for the Wolves. And in the first half, Minnesota 9-19 from three. They didn't turn the ball over when they have the whole series. The possession game, I'll talk about in larger detail later on. I think that idea obscures what is some real interesting stuff from Minnesota, especially defensively. And they went to something, you caught it really well live, is that they started bringing more gap help. And by basically making the looks harder around the basket, taking some of the driving angles away, and the Thunder in that first half, they only took 12 shots in the paint, 13. They were taking away some of the best stuff that the Thunder were doing.
They took more threes than twos in the first half. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing you can point to. Yeah.
They took more above the break threes. They took one fewer above the break three. I'm not counting the heave than twos. Like not even the corners. Like they were generated some from there, which they missed all of in the first half. But that gap help, it did a couple of things. One, it made the stuff around the basket harder. But two, it made the passing angles tougher. And so the Thunder, during that first half, they committed 10 turnovers, which produced 13 Minnesota points. And so I thought that, and that I think we're going to see very, very early in game 4. And there's a very distinct chance maybe it doesn't work quite as well as it did. Maybe, a lot of times when an adjustment is this big and happens at the beginning of a game, you get more coaching and time and all that. But it was a better strategy that was much better executed. And I think a lot of that can hold over. Whether it will is another question.
Yeah. Ben Taylor has done a great job with his work on Shai. And one of the things that he pointed out during the season of why Shai can be so tough to stop is that the NBA defenses are largely built to take away the three one pass away. And Shai is so good working in isolation or now in pick and roll, since he has Hartenstein to play with and Gobert in a drop coverage, is that when you give him space, it's depth. Because, and we've talked about this for years and years now with him, he has this incredibly reactive handle where if you just let him move back and forth with no pressure and give him the option to go left or right, which his handle is so good, he can take it. He can go forward. He can go backwards. He can get you leaning one way, get you leaning the other way. He'll draw a foul. He can blow by you. Oh, now he can get his forearm into you, knock you backwards, and get his mid-ranger, where he's one of the best mid-range shooters off the dribble that we've seen at the guard position. And so you need to limit his options more. And so they did that in a few ways, just not letting him play in space. They felt, Jaden McDaniels, we got good defenders. We got his cousin who can defend it pretty well. Hey, Dante DiVincenzo, great defensive reputation. And all those guys got cooked. McDaniels just looked a little bit better, but his problem is he's fouling him all the time. And he got really frustrated. So you need to just not let Shai dance you around like that. And that's what they got to finally. In a number of ways. And obviously their overall level of pressure was better. Obviously OKC shot poorly from three. But by showing more gap help with good defenders that they have, by the way. And also, like, it's not like this is some incredible theory that no one's ever thought of. The Denver Nuggets, with far inferior personnel to execute it, to the Wolves, had moments where they stopped Shai pretty well, and then admittedly Shai figured that out. And so maybe the feeling was, well, he's figured this out, so we'll just go back to our normal defense. And then they also had Rudy dropping too deep too, I would say. So they got him up higher. And like, Jared Dubin had a thread on this in game 2 of how Shai abused drop coverage. And I watched the film and I was like, yeah, the numbers were pretty good on it. But like Gobert committed a couple of dumb fouls, and Jalen Williams, like they were snaking back and forth. Like I was like, if Gobert could just get up a little bit more, like I would actually feel okay with that. And the one play where Shai made him look bad, he blew by him for a layup. But make him do that instead of getting to an easy mid-ranger, and like put some pressure on him, make a move and finish at the rim. He had another miss at the rim. And so in the first half, and so Shai's shot chart, he didn't have a single shot around that free throw line area, which was his bread and butter. They didn't let him get there. Or if he did, Gobert was there. So he either forced him to drive, or Shai was forced to kind of attack from the side, shoot baseline shots, which he missed some shots that he could make. He didn't shoot well in the first half, but long rant there. But it was, they didn't just let Shai Gilgeous-Alexander do what he wanted to and trust their defense. They changed up their rules and respected him, and in so doing, disrespected some of the other OKC Thunder, and that has been the formula that over the last 2 years, frankly, has worked the best against them.
Yeah, it's not the same, but it's similar in its intent as to what Dallas did last year to great effect. And this is a different Thunder group than it was last year, but I thought they did a really good job there. And so in the first half, the Minnesota Timberwolves had a 144 offensive rating and an 80.4 defensive rating. I personally think that the defensive rating there is the more significant number, especially because there were some real changes, and because this getting that many stops allowed Minnesota to be more effective in transition. They were able to push it, but I mean, I thought that they were more aggressive, they were more deliberate, and like Anthony Edwards had a couple of like just attacking the ball pick sixes at the beginning. I think that was the beginning of the second quarter, and they were able to kind of get the Thunder out of rhythm and be able to get some stuff in transition. And also, Anthony Edwards was hitting his threes, and like the first half of this was the best stretch he's had in this series by far.
Yeah, he was more aggressive, and they really concentrated on laying the wood on their screens to get him open, which they did. Gobert had a very good screening game, and then was able to be semi-effective on the offensive glass, doing enough there to where it wasn't a major problem. And clearly they out-hustled OKC by quite a bit. Like that play you talked about, like Edwards beat 3 guys to the ball on that pick six and went down for a dunk. So OKC 5 offensive rebounds, Minnesota had 11 for the game, and the steals, Minnesota actually had more steals than them as well. And so the energy level, the crowd, their overall activity was a lot better. Again, I think just getting guys more in the gap, bringing more help than flying around was pretty useful for them. But Edwards, I mean, like this is now 2 straight games where he's been looking pretty good against his Thunder defense. Yeah, he hit his threes 5-8, but he was 7-9 from 2. He was 11-17 from 2 in game 2. He looked pretty good, but then where it really started to cook for the Wolves was that Julius Randle went off.
Yes, Randle had a big game. He had 10 points in the first half, but ended up with 24 total. He was kind of part of eventually like putting it out to 40. And a lot of it was inside the arc. Randle was 7 of 10 on twos, got to the line 4 times, didn't turn the ball over. The Wolves' team, like barely turned the ball over. So yeah, I thought he played very well overall. And then another malign, because Randle had that huge first half of game 1 and then was largely a non-factor.
Yeah, but worth noting, he did it differently. He was getting into the post.
Sure.
He was going after Shai as well, which is something that they did much more of in this game too. Mike Conley also had a big game, some of that at Shai's expense. But that Shai guarding Julius Randle is an emergency matchup, which the Thunder generally, as good as they are, it's been very rare that they've just sent like straight hard double teams. They love to like, go double when the guy's back is turned or get in the gap or swipe down, but they may have to just go with like a straight hard double team because Randall is able to get to his spots and go right through Shai. Got fouled a fair number of times too. Let me look at his shot chart briefly. He just got a lot of shots in the paint, five buckets in the paint and a couple of fouls there too. So, and obviously every Wolf made their threes. That really helped. Conley also was finally hitting his shots. Like he's been awesome this series. We noted the plus minus even in the first two games. He was way in the positive as they were getting smoked. And so I think going with him, DiVincenzo has been kind of in this series. So relying more on Conley to organize the offense. And then because they're giving all this help, him defensively wasn't as much of a problem either. And he's also an intelligent help defender, maybe a more intelligent help defender than DiVincenzo, frankly.
Other maligned Timberwolves that I thought had a much better game 3 were the 3 bench guys that we focused a fair amount on at different moments in time. Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Donte DiVincenzo in the first half. Those 3 gentlemen combined to be 7 of 10 from the field. They made Naz Reid made a few threes, which he hadn't been doing early in the series, which always felt like the anomaly. Has been such a good shooter over the last couple of years. They brought some defensive intensity, and so that's big enough in and of itself. And then to me, one of the most surprising parts, though we thought it might be a possibility, but even in the competitive portion of the game, in the first half, Terrence Shannon, rookie out of Illinois, shot out of a cannon,
Shannon.
He was fantastic attacking closeouts at the very beginning of the second quarter. He was getting good shots, whether it was around the basket. He also, I think he hit a 3 if memory serves. And so I don't know that, or he missed a 3. I don't know that all of that is necessarily going to continue, but his aggressiveness, I thought, really helped give them something. And when you consider kind of like just getting somebody out there who gives you a shot, and maybe it's that Shannon is better in these Minnesota games, the Minneapolis games, than he will be if they kind of keep him in Oklahoma City, the crowd energy and everything else. But his process out there was very good. His aggressiveness really helped.
Yeah, just getting them out more in transition. And he just attacked the basket very hard. And I think some of the theory against Oklahoma City is that if you can attack really hard with no one in front of you, you can get fouls against them. They're going to reach in. Whereas if you're kind of more deliberate, they can bring guys over. They can attack your dribble from unexpected areas. It's a little bit harder. So he just goes in with abandon. He got fouled 3 times. He had 2 and 1s in that. And so just it's not like they're hurting for depth necessarily, but they needed to equalize the effort situation. And they did that quite a bit, whether in the floor game. Now, of course, the big elephant here too, if we move into the realm of maybe what's more unsustainable, I'd say sustainable is that they had a better plan against Shai. Now, Shai has countered that before, and he can, and they can go against more of a zone approach, or you can still set screens that Shai can then snake as well. Or if you get Gobert higher up on the floor and you're giving gap help, there'll be guys open on the baseline. They tried to play an Isaiah Joe a little bit more. That didn't really help that much. They tried playing Jalen Williams for some reason. The big, that was, I don't know why they went away from Kenrich there. Mark Daigneault just was, he figures if the guys are all equal players, he'd like to do something a little different just to change up the planning. But Jalen Williams was not it in this one, trying to guard Reed or Randall.
AJ Mitchell played in the first half, and he played while Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was on the floor. And I liked AJ Mitchell. I was banging the drum for AJ Mitchell before he got hurt with turf toe. But the whole theory of him is to be somebody who can generate offense when Gilgeous-Alexander's off the floor. When you play them together, then the Thunder, there were situations where the ball found Mitchell. He's taking the shot because that's what he's supposed to do, but he's not great at that. And especially considering he's been out for such a long time.
Yeah, it was a little bit odd, especially because they needed someone who was going to make some shots into the realm of the unsustainable. Though uh, the Wolves were 20 of 40 from three, and they just shot lights out in the first half as well. OKC hit some more late, but they were struggling. Minnesota 7 of 11 from mid range
Mm.
and 0 of 5 from mid range for OKC. Now, some of that, like that 5, is actually a good thing for the Wolves. Their defense is kind of, oh, we got Rudy Gobert. We'll take away the rim and we can take away the 3-pointer. And the Thunder just totally beat them up on twos. And the Thunder were awesome, is particularly in game one for mid range. And so the Wolves decided that they're not going to give that shot up as easily. And that worked out well. So we'll see what the counters are there. So some of that is process, some of it is just results, like the 7 of 11 from the Wolves in particular from mid range. Like that's just, but Edwards, he's getting good screens and getting to spots and rising up over the defense. They don't really have a guy other than maybe Jalen Williams with the length to deal with him that much. And they're setting really good screens. And the Thunder tried to get Isaiah Hartenstein up a little bit more, but once Edwards, because remember, he's a 40% three-point shooter on off the dribble threes, like when he starts hitting those, you're gonna have some problems if you're playing a regular big and you're not gonna switch. So maybe they even need to start thinking about going trying to pre-switch and keep guys out of the action a little bit more, and then go to more of the approach that I thought they would at the beginning of the series, which is force Edwards inside the arc, make him see a lot of bodies, and make decisions on the move in the paint, which I don't think he's that great at, and just generally pack it against him more. Like OKC has kind of done we'll just do our base defense and see. That's what Golden State did for the first game and a half or so, and then Anthony Edwards just ripped them apart. And it's probably time for OKC to start going a little bit deeper into the barrel to find some solutions against him.
Yeah, now and I'm excited to see how the Thunder react to this game, how they react to the Wolves outplaying them in every facet. And yeah, I agree with you that some parts of it were unsustainable, but the energy that Minnesota played with, forcing turnovers, the defensive process, their offensive process was much better. And so,
Because they should be able to stop OKC reasonably well,
sure,
right? Like I liked OKC in the series, but I thought that like OKC kind of made this defense look silly in the first two games, and the Wolves should be better than that, and they were in this game.
And so we'll get a much better idea of kind of where the equilibrium is in this series with game 4. And I still think the Thunder have superior talent, but the Wolves can not only win games in the series, they could win this series. And so I'm really excited to see the Thunder kind of they've gotten challenged before. Of course, they were forced to a game 7 by the Denver Nuggets last series, but they they need to change some stuff up. They need to get better shots. They need to execute better. And so a great team that has a pathway to the championship, getting hit in the mouth like this is fun.
And yeah, I enjoyed that. Now Dan had this stat, which no team that's won the championship has ever lost by 40 in the playoffs before, but there are teams that have lost by 39 and 38. The Warriors in 22 and the Celtics in 24 both did that. So I don't think the putting a 4 in front of the losing margin is significant. Although this is a team that's not supposed to get blown out like this because they play so hard. And yeah, that just didn't tell at all. Like Alex Caruso, no effect in this game. No steals, no blocks. Cason Wallace had no steals, no blocks. He was negative 30. And I mean, for the Thunder to combine for 2 blocks and 5 steals, like that's just not Thunder basketball. And they weren't able to get that transition that kind of
Well,
gets them going
and Nate
in this one.
in the first half, that was 1 steal and 1 block total.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, Mark Daignault he basically the message from OKC was we just didn't match their energy. Chet he was like, why couldn't you match their energy? And he said, I don't think that we couldn't, but we didn't. And that hopefully is correct for OKC. And We've seen them match the energy many times, but that's what they're gonna have to do. And their energy guys just got beaten by OKC or by Minnesota's a ton. I would like to see more of Cason Wallace still, uh, even though he was -30 in 16 minutes. In this one, Isaiah Joe, we keep asking for more of him, but he's gonna need to actually make a shot. He was 0 for 5. Some of that coming in the useless second half, of course. And I think actually, if I were OKC, I would, especially against the Randall Reed minutes, maybe go back to the no center look. I think that especially if they're struggling with their energy, and or maybe that's Kenrich Williams, maybe it's even J Dub at center, and try to go smaller, push the pace, show more buys, show more help, just more rotations, more freneticism. I think that's all things that OKC can do. All right, then that will do it for this look back at these 2 game 3s, and we'll be on playback tomorrow night to see what happens in game 4 of this series. I hope you will join us there, playback.tv/Nate Duncan NBA. See if we got any more things to hit on here. No, I think that's about